Okay, so in this video we're going to be covering the author of the day contribution of perhaps the most famous Roman ever to live, Gaius Julius Caesar. We call him Julius Caesar. He is going to be living right at the time of Cicero in the middle of what I call the century of the individual, this time of higgleness and piggleness, starting in 133 when Tiberius Gracchus went behind the back of the Senate directly to the people, and obviously he then fits from 100 to 44 March 15th in the middle of it. He was a tour de force of ability in all aspects, as it says in the study guide. He wrote Commentarii most famously, that is his genre. He also wrote a lost polemic, the Anti-Cato, after Cato's death in the Battle of Thapsus, and a funeral oration for his paternal aunt Julia. But more so, we need to talk about the Commentarii de Bello Gallico and the Commentarii de Bello Civili. As often is the case, there'll be some embedded items, so be paying attention for that. Remember that he is going to enter into public life in the Annus Mirabilis, the year of Cicero's consulship of 63 BC, when he is essentially going to be elected the Pontifex Maximus. Remember, the Pontifex Maximus is the highest office in the entirety of Roman religion, and it is a lifetime appointment, which he will remain, obviously, until 44 BC. It is a couple of years later that he will become a member of what we call the First Triumvirate. Remember that the Triumvirate, the First Triumvirate, is a combination of the powerful men, including Gnaeus Pompeius, Pompey the Great, Marcus Licinius Crassus, who of course was fabulously wealthy, and then Gaius Julius Caesar. What he was wanting is that to be consul in the next year of 59, which he was, because that means that he gets to be proconsul, governor of a province, in the following year, and with the help of his heavily influential friends, he's going to get exactly the one that he wants, which is of course the province of Gaul. Originally Gaul had only been the part of France, and Gaul is modern-day France, but originally it had been the part of France that is down here, known as the French Riviera along the Mediterranean coast. But what he will do is that he will, with an army as assigned to him by the Roman people and Senate, he is going to take it into the whole of France. Gaul is what they called it, and he will of course add it to the Roman Empire over the course of 10 years. He has a special law that is going to be passed, the Lex Vitinia, that allows him obviously to take command over the entirety for that 10-year period. Now, when this happens, he is going to be writing words on the nature of his conquest, but he doesn't write history. That would be a biased analysis. Instead, what he is going to be writing is going to be what we have as the title of the major work, the Commentarii de Bello Gallico, a commentary, as it were, that is going to obviously chronicle, as hopefully as it appears to the reader, an unbiased account. Now, obviously that is not the case, but the reason why Commentarii and not history is because he is wanting to seem as detached, even though he is the main character in these commentaries. And what he would do is that every single year he would send back to Rome a new book of his accomplishments in Gaul, and these books would be read by the public, and they would just simply indicate their pleasure of him adding to the whole of the Roman Empire and the glory, and they would also show his absolute and utter military brilliance. Now, in these books, there are going to be a grand total of 8 of them, and the 8th, however, is not penned by Caesar, but rather by his general, Aulus Hirtius. And of these books, I need you to pay close attention to 2 of them. One is going to be book 4, which is 55 BC, that you can see here, in which he crosses 2 bodies of water. One, he crosses the Rhine River. The Rhine River essentially functions as the border between France and Gaul. And up there it is, and you can see it here. There's the Rhine River, that is the border between Gaul and Germania. It is the widest and greatest river of all of Europe as far as its depth and speed of current. And essentially what he simply does is goes across and bullies a couple of German tribes because he wants to flex his muscles. The other great body of water that he crosses is the English Channel right here in that same year of 55 and goes into Britain. He is the first Roman ever to go to Britain. He does not add Britain to the empire, but in those 2 ways he essentially goes and presses into the beyond the known world. Your other book that you need to pay close attention to is the last of his own pen, Book 7, which takes place in 52 BC. Remember that in 52 BC, that was the year of all kinds of chaos in Rome, and the chaos is going to be taken advantage of. Remember that the chaos stems in Rome of the murder of Clodius by Milo, leading of course to the speech of Cicero, the Promolone, and it will be then a fellow by the name of Vercingetorix who is going to unite all of Gaul and give Caesar his greatest potential threat of a loss. Fortunately for Caesar, And by the way, your first word that you need to put in is the member of the first triumvirate with Caesar that will become his rival, Pompey. Pompey. That's how you spell it. Pompey is your first. Nevertheless, he unites all of Gaul and almost defeats Caesar. However, Caesar is going to capture him at the Battle of Alesia, which is absolutely remarkable in that what is going to happen is that he, Vercingetorix, is going to find himself on a plateau. This is looking directly from above. Imagine that as a raised hill plateau. Caesar will surround him, but in order to protect his forces, Caesar builds two walls, one between him and Vercingetorix's forces, and then one between his men and the forces that are coming to relieve him. And the works that he makes are absolutely remarkable as far as the defense works that are, of course, going to be leading up to the wall. You can see some of it here. He has ditches, one filled with water, and it's really just a remarkable feat of engineering, unlike that we could ever have seen. Nevertheless, what is going to then happen is Vercingetorix will be defeated, and thus will come to an end of his Commentarii de Bello Gallico. Almost immediately you have the other work of Caesar, and again, as I've said previously, that these works of Caesar are trying to be presented as detached, which means that Caesar, even though he is the one writing, and he is the main character in the commentaries, he always refers to himself in the third person. He does never say, I did this, I do that, and so forth and so on. By the way, your second word that you need to put in is Gaul itself. Just G-A-U-L, Gaul, which is of course what the Romans refer to what we now know of as France. But nevertheless, your next work is the Commentarii de Bello Civili, because as he was done in Gaul, he is going to immediately fight a new war. And this war is going to be not the Gallic War, but actually a war against another Roman. That is because when Caesar had finished up and wanted to return to Rome, he cannot cross the boundary between Italy and Gaul, which is the Rubicon River. If he does, at the head of his army, he will be breaking Roman law, be declared a Roman enemy. But if he crosses over as a political civilian and not the head of his army, he will be prosecuted. Because back in the day that he was obviously the consul of 59, he had a co-consul, as you always do, a fellow by the name of Bibulus, and he absolutely ignored all sorts of collegiality or taking into account his colleagues' opinions, ideas, pronouncements, etc., instead relying on his bully friends Pompey and Crassus. And that is going to mean that if he crosses over, he will be prosecuted because of what he did to his co-consul, and he will be sent into exile. So he does the unthinkable. He crosses the Rubicon, which for us today is actually a term that we use to indicate a point of no return, and he utters the phrase as he does it, Alia jacta est, the die has been thrown, the die is cast, and he begins the great civil war against Pompey, because that is to whom the Roman Senate is going to turn. They will turn to Pompey and ask Pompey to, of course, represent the Senate and the Roman people, and the civil war will break out. Pompey is going to, of course, immediately flee, not because he is scared, but because from his time of fighting against Mithridates in the 60s BC, all of his resources, all of his men and other sorts of things that he needs for fighting is here in Greece. And so, after he almost loses the Battle of Dyrrhachium, Caesar, however, will catch up to Pompey, and they will fight the Battle of Pharsalus, thus leading to Pompey's ultimate defeat. Caesar is not quite done, and of course he's telling us all this in the Commentarii de Bello Civili. And so he, of course, is going to chase Pompey all the way down to Egypt, where Pompey has fled, because it is being, of course, ruled over by the flute player's son, a 14-year-old boy, who himself is fighting a war with his sister/wife Cleopatra. And as soon as Pompey arrives, that boy king has Pompey's head chopped off to present the Caesar. Caesar, meanwhile, obviously will be persuaded by Cleopatra, she can be very persuadable, that he, Caesar, should support her in the civil war against her brother for Egypt. And so he fights a series of wars to clean up the empire from those remaining fragments of Pompeian supporters, including a war in Alexandria, including a war in Africa, and including a war in Spain, defeating Pompey's sons. And that is why you see then for Gaius Julius Caesar the other works that are down here, De Bello Alexandrino, of course all commentaries, De Bello Africo, De Bello Hispasiani, they are attributed to Caesar, but he did not pen them. It's much like the 8th book of the De Bello Gallico, and thus that is it. Now, your other author that I want to include in here is going to be none other than Caesar's engineer, a fellow by the name of Vitruvius. Vitruvius essentially is the major source that we have for ancient Roman architecture, and his great work is De Architectura, which literally means concerning about, or as it were colloquially, on architecture. He also, however, besides being an architect, is going to serve as Caesar's military engineer, and he was the one, obviously, that helped so many of these engineering feats in the time of Caesar. When Vitruvius writes, he is going to obviously focus on proportionality, and particularly the orders of Greek columns. And by the way, your third word that you need to put in, your third item, is going to be simply Vitruvius himself. V-I-T-R-U-V-I-U-S, Vitruvius. And he focuses, does Vitruvius, on the orders of architecture: Doric order, Ionic order, and Corinthian. And here you can see the difference in them all. In the Doric order, which is this right here, you can note it by the columns. Obviously it has the fluting on the shaft, in other words the grooves, and it is just plain. There is no ornamentation at the capital. That's what we are focusing. Ionic is going to be a little bit more, of course, ornate, in that it will feature a volute. That's a little curl that you see right here. Volute, and that is your next word that you will put in. V-O-L-U-T-E. So you have the Doric, you have the Ionic with the volute, and then finally the last one is, and there you can see the Doric order, in that it of course is going to be just old plain Jane, followed by the Ionic order, noted by its volute at the top, and then finally you have Corinthian. Corinthian is noted at the top capital, the head of the column, for its acanthus leaves. It's a particular kind of plant that is all around the Mediterranean, and that is how you can recognize that you are dealing with Corinthians. So the next time you're riding around Covington, please note any building that has columns on it, churches or banks or any sort of building like that, and you'll be able to know whether we're talking about that it is in the style of the Doric style, plain Jane, whether it is an Ionic with, of course, the volute, or whether it is Corinthian, which, of course, features the acanthus leaves. And there's another order called composite, frankly, that combines both the volute of Ionic and the Corinthian, and that is your last word, composite. C-O-M-P-O-S-I-T-E. Composite. So thanks for watching, and hopefully this helped you study and you benefit for earning that 100 at the same time. Thanks.